There's a brilliant book, I always allude to it. It's called The Poisoned Bowl. Next time I'm here, I'll bring it in. And it describes to a T the public school system of the United Kingdom. And it focuses, I think, on Radley College, Eton, Winchester, this sort of elite fee-paying. The rest of the world call them private schools. We call them public schools due to the Public School Act, which has to allow children from impoverished backgrounds access. So no matter what background, you can always go to Cambridge. You can always, hence our democratic so-called fair system. But in reality, it doesn't really happen, you know. But it looks on why it produced the people it produced, and why the allegations that have been met out against these places. You know, what is the justification? And what the conclusion of this is that the education system is based on the Greco-Roman gladiatorial school system. It's exactly the same. Beatings and very important because it's one way. Is that an allowed one? Is it? It's one way of causing people to succumb and to break their will. It's been well known in torture and things like that. It causes acquiescence, so it causes that compliance. It also it's also it destroys that element of the person, the soul, and everything else. And when it's done by a member of their own sex, there's that element of demasculation and shame. And the beatings, well, if you beat anything, you're going to toughen it up, but you're going to damage it at the same time. Now, I always remember when I was part of Scotland Yard's Vice Unit, we would raid brothels, and different areas of London, they had a different demographics. So the brothels catered for that clientele. So, for instance, if you went to Earl's Court, you would get gay brothels. And then if you went around Paddington, they would be more your straight working class brothels. But one of the areas was Bayswater and Mayfair. They were very upmarket, very, very upmarket, big mansion type flats. And we raided one, and it was just off, I think, South Alderley Street, which is sort of round by Grosvenor Square, just off Park Lane, that sort of area. So we're talking top prime real estate there. And what we would do is one of the team would go in as a potential customer, and then once they're through the door, the whistle would go in, and everyone would bomb burst in and just steamroll through the building. And we did this one. We got through the door, and off we went, and we kicked open this door, and there was this fella there, and he was obviously like a city gent, very well spoken, and he was in a suit, well, partially dressed, but he was bent over, being spanked with a cane. Right, it was a fellow in his 50s maybe, by this prostitute, whatever, dominatrix, whatever, I don't know. And she was caning this guy, and he said in the most plummiest sort of old Italian voice, he said, "My God, officers, am I in trouble?" And my sergeant went, "Get your trousers on and off." It was a bit like a scene from the Sweeney. Oh yeah, and he's trying to run and pull his trousers up and get out the building as quick as he can. But it was interesting because you're thinking he's posh, and the caning thing. And if you look at the Richard Curtis comedies like the Blackadder's and that, they always allude to take a crumpet up the rear without blubbing. It's alluding to you know, and six of the best trousers down. There's always that posh boy, you know, me census, don't talk me a thing or two. So they always allude to that sort of, you know, behaviour, and it's normalising. Now, I can remember talking with Corinne about this. What is it about these posh upper class lot and canings and that? And she said something interesting. She said they're placed into an environment in which these horrific things are done to them. And it is horrific. A grown man caning a young boy's bottom. I mean, it must do a severe amount of damage for one. I mean, if that was done now, I mean, that would be borderline GBH. You know, that would be a prison job. But the child's not in control. But they revisit it as an adult, and they are now in control. And it's a bit like that, hurt people. They have to bring about that misery in others, but they're perpetrating it. Domestic violence is another one. Domestic violence perpetrators are very, very similar, in which they only feel normal when they're creating that misery that they once were in, and when everyone else around them is in. So there is that psychology sort of in that thing. But coming back to that, it's that need for that sort of behaviour to continue, which would explain the need for young boys. And bear in mind, so many members of our so-called cabinet have been through this system. And if then they go on divested from their mother at a very early age, so no sort of matriarchal love, put into this very strict, military-style, strict, masculine environment where discipline is harsh. They have what they call the system, where the older boys, they have governance over the well-being and the discipline of the younger boys. So we've got teenage boys. And what do teenage boys do? I mean, this might sound vernacular, but that is it until they're in their 30s, And especially when you say this to women who've got teenage boys, they can't stand it. No, it doesn't happen. Well, that's the reality. It's called testosterone. That's what goes on. And of course, so that first sexual experience of that young boy will be some sort of sexual assault. And again, what happens is they then, as much as they hate it, they go on to perpetrate on others, which is how bullying works. And the whole thing, and of course you can't go anywhere because they won't allow it. There's a book, I can't remember the name of it, but it was written by the son of Lord Bewley. He wrote a book. His name will come to me in a minute. I knew the guy quite well. And he sort of goes on about his time in Eton. And he said the f***ing system in Eton, he's written a book, so this is all public domain. We're not going into any libelous ground here. And he said that the f***ing system in Eton is nothing more than a rent boy racket. And he was by the older boys. He went and complained about it to the dean or the don or whatever they call it. And he said that, this guy caned him so hard, took a run up at him. He was something like 9 years old. And he said it was like being hit with red hot wire. And then he put him under the pupillage of a Monsignor as a one-to-one thing. And he just got, by this guy. So, so where do you go? You've got no one to turn to, so it's damaging these people, and I think Savile's job was to cater for these people's needs. He found a niche. You're talking about someone with a very, very high IQ. He'd made himself. He was just a pimp, really. I think that's what he was, but then he started to specialise, and he knew how to manipulate people, get them what they want, and of course, what happens is when things go wrong, you're in trouble. You're in a world of trouble. But then he's catering for, I would have said these, like these vicars and bringing young boys to them. And, how high up does that go? We saw it with Bishop Peter Ball, who was the best friend of Prince Charles. Again, nothing libelous there. This is public knowledge, and this came out in the independent inquiry. And they approached Charles for a statement, and he refused to give one. And he come under heavy criticism of that. And Bishop Ball was in boys, and he did get convicted of assault. And one of the boys went on. The BBC did a documentary of it, and one of his victims went on to commit suicide. And his father runs this campaign to this day. Why did the Church of England cover this up? But if you've got that information on someone, you're going to use it. Even Putin has turned around and criticised, the Western higher-ups within the political forum of being. He said it. He said, the British and American government are for the. So,
if you are looking for a harrowing, hard-hitting Christmas read as a gift for somebody, my latest book, I've written 17. This is part of a free book series. Latest one, third in the instalment, Sit-Downs with Serial Killers and Murderers. link in the description box below this video. From the back, having gained a rep for earning the trust of some of the world's most dangerous people, Shaun delves into his most hard-hitting interviews with the most menacing and violent murderers he's ever met. From serial killers to brutal prison gangs, Shaun has collected his most fascinating and incredible conversations with shocking criminal figures. He explores the life of an armed robber, a man who spent 45 years behind bars, and a serial killer with 52 confirmed victims. That's Delmas Colvin. I had to listen to that podcast again the next day. It disturbed my sleep. It's the most chilling one I've ever done, I would say, was interviewing Delmas in prison where he's serving life. If you're interested in these books, we appreciate your support. Links will be in the description box below this video if you're watching on YouTube. Cheers.